Ambazonia, special loyalty. Praise to our Savior who granted us the freedom. Allegiance to the hero who goes along with God.
Glory will rise and never to fall. Hearing a nation flowing with milk and honey. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation adored forevermore. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation.
The meeting is now called to order, and we will begin with a roll call. Bob Marley?
Yes, sir.
Abakwa?
Present.
Shankfor?
Yeah, present.
Auntie?
Here.
Tange?
Here.
Cousin?
President.
Okay. All right, thank you. So some opening comments and remarks. Bob Marley is a special guest at today's meeting. I've mentioned Bob before. We go back some 20 years. He'll be joining us. He's in town from another African country, so we're glad to have him join us.
You may say a little bit more about Bob Marley. You just said another castle that.
Well, Bob Marley and I go back some 20 years. We both were involved with Harvard University, and it came at a very influential time in my life. And at that time, Bob was running around Africa and the U.S., teaching African countries and helping them to get on the internet. So I'll let him speak a little bit himself about that experience. Currently, he is the head of a venture capital company. He's here at this time as they're getting ready to close one of their funds. So those interested in getting involved in one of the funds should speak to him offline about investment opportunities that he can present to you. Bob, you want to just give a little bit more background about the early days and how that led you to what you're doing now?
Well, yes, thanks, sir, Uncle. So I helped build a couple of companies across Africa, mostly internet businesses, what do you call ISPs. And now what I do, through that I came to the Beckman Center, where I was part of the fellowship program that looked at, I think I did 3 programs. The first one was on telecom policy reforms in Africa, which was essentially liberalizing the internet sector. That's what led to a lot of ISPs being created. Then I got on to my second program was on the infrastructure, the internet infrastructure on the continent, which was mostly ISPs and submarine cables.
What is ISP for those who don't understand?
Internet service providers.
Okay.
And then, got into building, submarine cables, which is the fiber network that connects the continent. So those were kind of the 3 things I did. And then that sort of essentially culminated in what I'm doing now, which is backing the next generation of entrepreneurs that are really leveraging that infrastructure to create new technology and solutions that solve critical problems on the continent. So, you know, as David said, as Uncle said, through that process we met and we've been great friends ever since. Yeah.
Cool. Back to you. Thank you.
Are you in any of the, are you in Cameroon?
No, well, one of my businesses is in Cameroon. We started a company there. We opened an office there called Haptel. That business is still early days, but so I've been out there, been Yaoundé Douala a couple of times, Buya a couple of times. Was it 3-4 years ago? I've not been back in a while now, but yeah. I know, and actually one of my uncles lived there for many years and unfortunately passed. You know, one of my uncles lived in Yaoundé for many years. I finally came there to meet with him, and unfortunately he passed about 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It was the last time I was there.
Just following up on Changfor's question, am I correct in that your firm, one of the investments that it did have in Cameroon was affected by the shutdowns that would take place from the government? And if so, can you speak about that?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into a political heat of things, and generally I try to stay out of politics because I want to focus on the business side. But I think that there is, I like to also focus on the future. I think there needs to be a lot of political reforms in Cameroon in order to make business thrive. I mean, we experience a pretty, not the best situations of trying to get a business off the ground there. In the political forces made it not too pleasant. So I think it's something that is important because there's no nation that has developed without a private sector. And so there needs to be serious, efforts at enabling the private sector over there.
So true. So true.
And so anyway, that's just I don't want to sort of get into the, the details, but I think what needs to be done in that area.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a comment, Bob Marley. It is not that has been the cry of the people. If I can have a classmate who he's based in the UK, he came to Cameroon, tried to start a business. 2 years, they gave him a runaround. He went and started a business in Ghana, and he's making strides in Ghana. And last week he called me and said, "Oh, I got a letter about what we were trying to do in Cameroon." And that is 2 years down the line when he's been in Ghana for how many years now? Wow. So yeah, it's crazy. It is part of their policy to stifle the private sector so that everybody depends on the government and they can manipulate and do whatever they feel. So yeah, it's just what you're saying is really true, and there needs to be that political reform to make to bring about a thriving private sector environment.
So with that, Abakwa, are we ready for a report from Ground Zero?
Sure.
Changfor?
Thank you. I start with the COVID-19. It's quite interesting from my profession as an epidemiologist. It seems as if Africa is really largely protected, or not severely impacted by the COVID-19 virus from what we're seeing, and from looking at the epidemiology, from looking at the transmission dynamics. And there is still a lot to learn why we have very, very low cases. Well, some of the theoreticians believe that because we have a largely very, very young population, the virus is not hitting us that hard in terms of mortality. But in terms of morbidity, in terms of being infected, is spreading, but again, not as exponentially and rapidly as we see in the West, in other countries. But that is good news. Good news for us. But again, but the question is, once infected, even if you don't get that sick and you're able to overcome it, does that mean that you actually get rid of the virus in your body and that you will not have any future consequences in your body? Again, that is still to be answered, because again, what that virus does, the after effects are really still not well known, even in the West. So we are at about 21,000 plus cases right now, about 450 deaths so far in Cameroon. Well, people continue to move around without that much protection, which I think is still worrisome. I think people should really continue to protect. Our schools are planning to get open. Nobody knows exactly what measures. Of course, before schools closed down, the traditional measures were put in place. But how that is going to be reinforced when school actually starts is yet unknown, and whether they will be able to reinforce it. I don't know how many masks are around. I don't know how many sanitizers are around. I don't know how many, whatever is around to be able to contain this virus once it starts. Okay, coming back to our problem. You all are aware of the famous Come To March that was supposed to take place on the 22nd, which apparently took place in some parts in Douala and some parts in Yaoundé, and which of course was squashed by the heavy presence of the police and army. But of course, you guys were all witnesses to what they were doing. Some people came out, but you didn't see that type of brutalizing, arrest. Some might have been arrested, but that type of brutalizing, injuring people, shooting directly people, of course, we didn't see that. What did we have in our own area? The same day, 5 innocent young men are killed in Bamenda and another 5 here in Boya for no reason whatsoever. So the massacre continues. Well, in terms of Bamenda, well, I think life is returning a little bit, especially over the weekends. I hear that motorbikes can now move in some parts. The taxis are moving even right to the center city right now. So people are able to do business, banking, marketing, and all that. And I hear some buses were brought in to fill the gap of the motorcycles that are not running. And of course, our boys are planning to put them out of out of business, because it's an unnecessary interference. Those kids, a lot of them university graduates, over 25,000 of them make their living from transporting people in town with very, very bad roads. And then also feeder roads into these motors are just too bad, and all the motorcyclists can actually transport people. So normalcy has not really actually returned progressively. So I don't know the details as to what negotiations are going on to get the bikes back on the road as they were before. I don't know what is going on right now. So, well, you also know about elections. Again, regional elections have been again called on, and as usual, of course, they want to hold them here, just as they hold their council elections. Nobody voted, of course, they would still go ahead and appoint their regional councillors. So again, our stand is that there should be no elections when people are being killed left and right, no stability, people are being displaced, and all whatnot. So that is the brief from ground zero right now. So,
Thank you, Jan, for Um, any questions for Chang for?
Just 1 minute, if I can just share the video of what Changfo talked about the killings in Bamenda. Viewers be advised and be warned because it's very graphic. These are the kids. These are the kids that were killed in Bamenda, just the day that they were demonstrating and peacefully demonstrating in Yaoundé. The police did nothing. Nothing was going on in Bamenda, but you can see the atrocity that happened to our people. We can just pause for 30 seconds just to honor the lives of those who have sacrificed for freedom, and remember them, please. May their soul rest in peace. We'll never forget their sacrifices. Over to you, Uncle.
Yes, well, we're going to begin today's discussion around history with a discussion of the historical role played by colonial powers. British Cameroons as a trust territory under the British. Abakwa, would you like to introduce the subject?
Yes, Uncle, thank you very much. And like I said, in our discussion today, we will examine the historical relationship and the role played by the two colonial powers, Britain and France, to influence politics in the British Southern Cameroons. What role should the Commonwealth government play in the conflict in the Southern Cameroons, knowing that French Cameroon is a member of the Commonwealth? From November 26 to November 28, the chairperson of the AU Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahatma, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, and the Secretary General of Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, Her Excellency Louis Mushikiwa, visited Cameroon. So on this, we will engage in the discussion. Changfo will start.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think that relationship has been examined, but of course, and without arriving at any concrete action as to what needs to be done. Again, when one looks at the fact that Britain had a mandate to lead the Southern Cameroon Trust Territory to independence, and that France had as a mandate from the United Nations to lead East Cameroon to independence. We realized that East Cameroon, of course, did yes. But then when it came to us, of course, we know that Southern Cameroons went to Nigeria, and Southern Cameroons decided to, through a useless plebiscite, to join Nigeria. I mean, to join Cameroon. But of course, we've examined in detail that we never got the independence that we were supposed to get from that plebiscite, and that we were actually colonized. We invaded, occupied, and colonized up to now. We are nobody, we don't exist, we shouldn't talk. And of course, France, says nothing whatsoever. Because whatever agreement France and Britain got into, that made Ahidjo to move inside and move to this territory just the day before that independence. We will never know what deal they struck. And it seems as if France doesn't care less. France is a democratic society, but of course, part of its apparent neo-colonial territory is being almost eradicated. I mean, being almost wiped out from the face of this earth. France says nothing. Then Britain itself, that ought to be doing something, despite several demonstrations, several attempts by Ambazonians to make Britain know the state of our plight with all the evidence that you can command. Some of the lords in the House of Commons have even taken positions. Some of the parliamentarians have even taken positions. But those issues have never been formally addressed in the British Parliament and a resolution taken. Unless I'm wrong, unless my history is wrong. But what I know is that individuals, influential politicians have made attempts. Seen those attempts, they are concerned. And as a democratic society, only God knows why this situation persists. You even ask yourself, what is so wrong in even coming back even to the pre-plebiscite or pre-whatever unity state, where we run our own affairs? Why is Britain so reluctant? Why did we do that? They left us so bitterly to the point where we're being almost exterminated. Our institutions all closed. They know this institution. They were here. They started PowerCam, CDC, or name it. They saw that. They thought they were not rich. We are now very, very, very rich. So what is it that they cannot even speak for us? At the United Nations, they cannot talk. In their own parliaments, they don't discuss to take a real solution. The American Senate instead is there trying, the American Congress is there trying. They're the only ones that are trying to sensitize the world. The UN is meeting now, and I'm concerned that they may meet and then still go without, again, no concrete evidence taking place. Scotland came here. You could realize what did they come here for? They come and end up in Yaoundé with all the diplomatic niceties with the government, and they leave. Even those that even come sometimes and even come to ground zero, you don't even see the evidence is there. When they go back, you don't even see what they're doing with this evidence. You don't even see what important stand they're taking and what impact that has, and where they have even addressed their concerns to the international community and why and whether and why action is not being taken. So it is kind of funny that, of course, the Francophonie will know where they are. They don't have anything to do with us. When they come here, they have basically no pronouncements about our territory. The AU fellow is useless. He's been here several times. It's very obvious. He's been abused severally in the press. And that is where we are. So let me stop there so that Amin can also continue.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity. I'm just sorry that I came late. I was attending another meeting. It's a busy week for me. So, well, just to dive in directly into the subject, talking about the relationship between the colonizers and the Southern Cameroons, or I would say the Southern British Cameroons, because I like to call it that way because following the French propaganda, you see, they make people to understand that they have even gone to the extent of making people to understand that the South British Cameroons is part of Eboloa, which means the southern part of Cameroon. And that's even one of the first pretexts they use in joining the Commonwealth. Although Britain was there, they knew the truth. So the admission actually passed through the back doors. It never went the right way. I say, I would not like to use the word colonization because we were not actually colonized by Britain. Neither was French Cameroon colonized by the Republic of Cameroon. We were cross territories. We were cross territories. But however, the colonizers, when the colonizers, Britain and France, actually came in as third parties into those trust territories brought in by the United Nations. Nevertheless, their actions on that trust territory actually went astray, was diverted from being people who were supposed to prepare those territories for full independence and giving them back their sovereignty. They became colonizers. I believe that French Cameroon was never colonized until 1958 when they signed the Franco-Cameroon, let me say the France-Afrique Alliance. When they signed that economic agreement with France, that was the year they sold their sovereignty, meaning that at the point where their independence was granted by the United Nations, France took over their sovereignty. We mean they sold their sovereignty to France even before their independence was granted. We should remember that there were two things in each trust territory, were the aspect of granting independence and the aspect of sovereignty. When it came to independence, granting independence to sovereign state, to trust territories, the only competent body was the General Assembly of the United Nations. And now, since the General Assembly could not carry out the running of the affairs of those trust territories, they brought in third parties, Britain and France, for both territories. So Britain for the Southern British Cameroons, was to run the daily affairs, prepare the minds of the people democratically, and putting them on the stage where they could defend themselves when they will be living. And that duty was to be carried out in accordance to the resolutions and in accordance to the resolution of the UN and the trusteeship agreements. But Britain never did that. Britain never carried out its functions as required because they abandoned us, just as we just heard from Chamfor. They abandoned us. And the question is why? Because Chamfor asked that why did that happen? And it's the same thing that happened to French, the French trust territory of Cameroon. When the French realized that these countries were about to get independence, they quickly rushed in to sign the economic agreement, thereby bringing the economy of those countries and the sovereignty of those countries directly under their control. Because in French Cameroon, de Gaulle told his administrators that they should inform the trust territories that it is they, the French, that will grant independence, not the United Nations. And the people there believed. Likewise, even in the British, the Southern British Cameroons, people actually believed that it was Britain to grant us independence, which is wrong. That's the false notion. Even up to date, we are discussing that many people believed that it was Britain that was supposed to grant us independence, which was false. Independence was to be granted by the UN, and Britain and French Cameroon were to hand us back that authority the UN gave them to govern us, that sovereignty. They were to give us back, thereby leaving the territory so that we can now start carrying out our own daily affairs. But that was not done. Why? Because if we go back to, if we even go far back to 1215, after June 1215, after the Magna Carta Agreement, when King John of England signed the Magna Carta Declaration that granted freedom of expression in Britain or in the UK, freedom of expression, freedom of worship, and so on. It brought in democracy, and some of the slave traders were not so happy with that, because it actually implied that the British were giving injunction not to trade again on slavery. And they did like it, actually. So now some of those barons started looking at other means of replacing the word slavery. You know, they started looking at new ways of exploiting this, what they were having during slavery. And that is how this idea of colonization came about. So they convinced the kings that, oh, you see, we can conquer territories, we can get a lot of things outside. So they were given that opportunity. The British government invested. And when they went there, what we were doing was actually slavery, but coined in another term called colonization. And after the First World War, Second World War, the French joined, you know, looking at the impact in the economy, and looking at they were trying to industrialize their territory. They needed those raw materials. They needed those things they were having during slave trade. So a new term now was developed known as colonization. So they were hiding behind that name to say that, oh, you see, we are just here to help you, we are here to work with you. But actually the fact was to exploit the people, get the raw materials for their industries, get the labor force to work for them, to supplement the forces they never had back at home. And that is how it went. And when the United Nations was born, the United Nations decided now that there should be an end to all this colonization, because they discovered that it was actually slavery. And the people who were actually behind this end of colonization were the Scandinavians. And that is what most people don't talk about. Although the Scandinavians themselves are very quiet people, you know, they were the actors behind the end of colonization, not only in Africa, but everywhere, in every part of the world. So they pushed forward, and luckily, the first Secretary General who was of the United Nations, Trived Lee, who was from Norway, he was Minister of Justice. So he had the opportunity of drafting some of these laws. And unfortunately, he could not implement some of these things, some of the laws. So when he left, another Scandinavia took over, known as the Hammarsjö, the Secretary General who died during the decolonization process, where he flew to Congo. So the Hammarsjö actually swore to put a total end to colonization. And that is why each territory that was to be decolonized, he himself was present. He was present at the ceremony. Unfortunately, September 1960, he died when he was preparing to come to the Southern British Cameroons, because our independence was already granted, and preparation for the granting of our independence was already discussed at the UN, but it was not yet granted until 21st April 1961 at the General Assembly, where 64 countries voted for that independence. So the Hammarsjö could not come because he died. So when he died now, the UN actually was in chaos, you know, they were in pains. Who was to replace him? The French fought, and they gave it to Jutan. Jutan was from Burma. Burma was was a territory influenced by the French. So the French wanted now to get a Secretary General who now will support them. And we should not forget, at the decolonization committee, the chair of that decolonization committee was a British. He's British. He was British. And the Secretary General was a Frenchman. So this now, getting the British and the French in the decolonization committee and then getting now a Secretary General who actually is under the French influence. He could now allow them now to change what the Hamas-Jaw and Trivedi have put in place when it comes to the decolonization of Africa. So these people now work together with their administration. So when it came to the Southern Cameroons for decolonization, Utan told them that, you see, I'm not a full Secretary General yet. I have to finish the terms of the Hamas-Jaw, so there's certain things I can't do. So he could not come for the decolonization of because some people ask the question that why was the UN not at Fumban, why they were not here? It was simple. The French merely instructed him not to come. It was because Utan claimed that he was Assistant Secretary General. He didn't have the full power. So he could not come during the decolonization process. And what he said that the decolonization committee now used the advantage not even to send experts during the Pumba conference. So they abandoned the Fonchas administration. We should not forget the British influence. They told the president not to the president of the committee not to send anybody. And again, the Secretary General was a French. They told him, forget about those things. Foncha administration was left alone to go in there. So let me just round up here. So that is how they used the committee now to stop the handing over of the sovereignty of the British Southern Cameroon. And that's why you see up to date, Cameroon is a colony of the French.
Yes. Would anyone like to chip in?
Cousin?
I'm not a historian, but I think I know my history and I know my people's history.
Of course.
So the first thing that I just wanted to actually, I'm not sure whether I should say correct, but clarify is that Dag Hammarskjöld didn't die. When you say somebody died, it's supposed that he died a natural death. We know that Dag
plane
Hammarskjöld.
crash.
It was a crash in the crash.
A plane crash
in Congo.
They killed him in order to, the people who didn't like what he was doing killed him.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Like,
good point.
The other point that I wanted to actually make was the role of the French in this, because here you see slightly two versions of selfishness. The Queen, the English believing that British Southern Cameroons or the Southern Cameroons was a poor country, and the experience of small countries like Sierra Leone and others in the West African continent, which they didn't really want to keep supporting. Ignorance of the fact that there was a lot of resources within Southern Cameroons, just decided to say, let us either have them independent by joining the bigger Nigeria, or attach them to La République. That much, we would be able to say to ourselves, we don't have to support, they wouldn't rely on our budget. Now, on the La République side, it was more of avarice, which was the French lost the war in Nigeria. And after losing the war in Nigeria, they lost the fuel, the source of fuel that actually would drive the economy. And so they came up with a very, evil, sinister system run by a guy called Jacques Foccart. And so they had an Élysée cell, which was actually a cell that decided what African resources went to who within the French, how they were extorted, and who went to. And they made a judgment that, look, it was far easier to get dictators in Africa. That way you could use them to control the resources than to actually get elected by their own citizens to govern them. Because one of the critical reasons actually was when they discovered in Gabon. And they knew also that looking at the coastal area of Gabon, they looked at Ambazonia and looked at the entire country and knew that if you had oil in Gabon, there was oil in Gabon. What they said was it took about 7 years to go from identifying oil to start, drilling it and extracting it to make it to the market. And their calculation was that if you then have a democratic regime and you put your money in there and the democratic regime comes up and says they're no longer going to do business with you. So what do? These guys were thinking about us as some test, some quit, some not humans at all. Because somebody said in that regime that yes, the Africans can vote, but they would decide who the Africans vote for. So, which is just a slightly different version of Stalin's it doesn't really matter who votes, but who counts the vote, right? This is why they feared a democratic Southern Cameroons so much that when they actually were talking about this whole charade called plebiscite or Southern Cameroon, it's that French was coming in knowing was just one step to total assimilation. And that has explained our history right up to now. And that's why it's impossible, virtually impossible, when anybody talks about, oh, what is the Francophonie going to do about it? The Francophonie can't do anything. Who's the head of the Francophonie? We all know what the answer to that is. So the Francophonie here is it's a French puppet. And as a French puppet, there is nothing that the Francophonie can do other than try to figure out, or maybe try to come up with solutions that are just a charade meant to continue to keep us under control. The Brits, on the other side, there is nothing the Brits would do, because the way the colonial masters treat us in Africa is like masters treating their housemates. England cannot compromise its relationship with France or with any other major European power because of Southern Cameroon, because of people that they don't even consider to be human. Here, the only solution to this problem, as I see it, is we actually making it known to the world, that the rest of the world realizing that it's going to be death for all of us or freedom for those of us that are left. Until the neutrals, the people within those countries, pressurize their government to leave the veil of their faces, to see the atrocities that are being committed, the evil that is actually being meted out on the people, on other people, for what economists have come to term the curse of the plenty. The only reason we are dying and the only reason we are in this situation is because of our resources. If we never had resources, guess what? Our country would have been free all along. But the most important resource across the entire universe, across mankind's entire history, is the resource that we want, and that is freedom. Because without that, nothing else counts. So that, in my view, that's the way I look at the role of the French and I look at the role of the Brits in our history. And so I can expect nothing from the Commonwealth. I can expect nothing from Francophonie. Sometimes, of course, the clock is, a broken clock is right twice a day. Maybe they may go and see it someday and then somewhere and somebody says something that might appear as if they are really seeking a solution to this problem. But all of us know that if a solution comes via Francophonie or the Commonwealth, it is going to be done by accident. It's not going to be by design, because the nature of those clocks, it's not to advance development and control of people's resources by the individual people of those places. It is meant to continuously, empower certain powers. In this case, France and Britain, whom, because of changing world dynamics and changing world politics, have seen a lot of their once mighty influence continue to erode. Somebody in the French Cameroons, actually in La République du Cameroon, has got to do what the likes of Kagame have done. That is sever the umbilical cord between the French and and the Cameroons, and for most of the continents of Africa. If you actually want Africa to move, just get a more expanded view and look at Africa. The countries in Africa today that are actually beginning to crawl in democratically, developmentally. Show me one Francophone African country in there. There is none. It's not an accident. It's what these people designed. Foucault might have died many years ago, but that whole cabal still exists. Explains why Macron, who was in diapers at the time when Biya took over the presidency, really cannot actually even call this guy out, because they know that it is from the resources of this country that they are stealing, that they are feeding their own people. That's the problem.
Well, thank you very much, Kazim and Changfo and admin. Listening to all of you, the question I ask myself is, what are all these African nations doing in the Commonwealth? None of them has spoken up. And it just, I don't know if I am looking into it, but too deep. It's the same situation. What role do African nations really play at the United Nations? They just go there and sit and watch? I think, I hope the international community and the African countries in particular should really, if they are really serious of representing our people, they should see that the pilgrimage that they make to New York, to the UN, is just to go and spend money, and that it doesn't represent them. I think it will serve us more if they focus on the continent. Because if my knowledge, my limited knowledge can testify, you will see that if there is atrocity in any member of NATO, any country, a member of NATO, or if any other country, a bigger country, invades the smallest country in NATO, you invade the whole of NATO. I cannot really understand that English-speaking countries, Nigeria, Ghana, and all across Africa, are seeing the human destruction that is going on in Ambazonia, and they are mute. And sooner or later, they will meet again and say they are Commonwealth nation. Of what importance, of what need is that Commonwealth to Africans if it doesn't take African life important?
Thank you, Obafwa.
Well, I was just saying that it was a very important, that's an important question you're asking there. You see, we should not also forget to know the part that the Southern British Cameroonians actually played themselves in all these relationships with the colonizers and with French Cameroon. When it comes to the Francophonie, we should realize that in 1970, Governor Ayijo actually applied for admission into the Francophonie, but this admission was delayed, and the simple answer why it was delayed is because they were trying to register Cameroon with the name Federal Republic of Cameroon, and in practical, that name actually never existed anywhere. That name contradicted the name they had at the UN files. Because their name at the UN file was La République du Cameroun. Now, coming to the Francophonie, they wanted to register it with the Federal Republic, La République Fédérale du Cameroun, the Federal Republic of Cameroon. So the other Francophonie countries argued that, look, you are not actually a pure Francophonie country, because the objective here of Francophonie is, the first objective in their charter is to promote the French language. So Ayijo was asked how he is going to amend, how he is going to compromise that. So he said that he was going to increase the assimilation process, that's Francophonizing our territories, putting in place a project where we'll be totally, where Southern Cameroons will be Francophonized totally. So it dragged until in 1975, Cameroon now became member of the Francophonie. And one of the aspects, one of the projects that I usually promised was to actually put us in a position where we could not carry out our sovereignty, the right to govern ourselves. So all our institutions were totally dismantled. So it was actually, the speed was increased, I will put it that way. And there was pressure from the French ambassador in Yaoundé to see that we are totally Francophonized. So, but unfortunately for them, they could not do that because it embodied a lot of changes, which at the same time, they did not want our people to rebel. And even in 1995, when we were about to join, when we joined the Commonwealth, they used but our own person. They used the Anglophones, pushed them in front to go and talk, to go and represent La République du Cameroon. And they told them that we are actually one country, there is no difference. And we had people, the present Prime Minister, Dongute, he was the one. He went there and even confirmed that Ambazonia was the southern part of Cameroon. These are things that most Ambazonians don't know. So when I hear people say that he's a credible diplomat, I usually laugh. It's because they don't know all this history. You see, and when you look at the project of the Commonwealth, there is no project of the Commonwealth that is carried out in Ambazonia. I will challenge anybody from the administration, even from Don Gute himself, to show me any project. The only project that was carried out by the Commonwealth under the influence of Princess Charles was the Abakwasupe flyover, the overhead bridge. The rest, everything, including even the hydroelectricity power instruments he gave to build the Menchum Fall, where it could supply electricity, at least in the whole of West Africa. Bia's government took it Yaoundé, and Charles withdrew the money. So, and when we look all the projects, apart from that, there is no project from 1995. All projects carried out by the Commonwealth are done in French Cameroon. And when we come even to diplomatic representatives, all diplomatic representatives, be it consulate, be it embassy, are all in French Cameroon, except one consulate, Nigeria consulate, that is in Ambazonia, and is found in Boya. And why is it in Boya? It's because of the Biafra war, where Ayijo, seeing the impact of refugees flowing from Nigeria during the Biafra war, he wanted to stop them from not coming to French Cameroon. So he asked, they agreed with the Nigerian government to open a consulate in Boya, where they could now receive some of these refugees. Because he knew that the impact will be so high if these refugees crossed to French Cameroon. So he wanted them, with the little resources we have by then, to take charge of those refugees. So that is why the Nigerian consulate was allowed to, Nigeria was allowed to open a consulate in Boya, and up to today, the consulate is still there. Apart from that, nothing. All missions, if you want to do anything in Ambazonia, they refuse. It has to be done in French Cameroon. And that is how they have continued with this colonization.
We had briefly Bob Marley join us. I mean, we would like to, whether he has any closing words of wisdom. Is he around? And
No, I've listened in very interesting, analysis of the past, and it's good to discuss the past and be very abreast with it. But my view is that we got to look into the future as well. We need to spend 30% of our time on the past and 70% of our time on the future. So what does this mean for the future? I mean, we started this conversation with a very bizarre picture of young adults being murdered for, exercising their right. I would have expected that 70% of the discussion will be on that, on how do we make sure that another young kid, that's the future we're killing right there. I'm not underestimating the conversation. I really appreciate the history and the experiences and analysis. I'm not doubting that it's very important. But I think that, we have a future that is very contemporary, that is challenged. The fact that this meeting started with a photo of, I think there were 3 young men and a lady dead on the streets for exercising their right to a peaceful demonstration. I would have expected that to have been the centerpiece of our conversation, and to ask ourselves, what can we do from here to make sure that doesn't happen again? And how do we make sure that these kids don't even have to demonstrate? Because these are kids that should be in school at this age. They shouldn't be demonstrating. They should actually have the privilege of being educated at this age, because they are the future of the country. So if they are being murdered and they are not being given education, and now they are being murdered, I expect that should be the centerpiece of the conversation, that how do we make sure that doesn't happen again? So maybe if I can say anything useful, maybe the next meeting, this should be the center, the focus of the discussion. We'll discuss the history, but how now do we prevent this kind of future from becoming the new normal and create a better future for the next generation? So that's my little contribution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, Bob Marley, as always, those are words of wisdom. But just to tell you that we brought this here, we discuss about the killings of our brothers and our children, mothers every day. We talk about it, how we can go before, but as much too, we also have to bring the history, because that is what La République has used to deceive these people. Because, I mean, it's Bob Marley who said it. If you don't know where you are coming from, you will not know where you are going to, and they will control your life. So we cannot kill that history and let these kids without the foundation, else they will be blown away by the wind. So thank you very much for those words of wisdom. And just to tell you that we discuss this again and again. So thank you for really putting a point on that. That is very, very powerful. Auntie, do you have any words of wisdom or closing remarks?
No, but I think Bob Marley's right. We do need to expose that, the murders and just the whole depopulation of the area.
Well said. Thank you very much. The only thing I can say is I'll go back to what Chamfo talked about unity. We are here in the diaspora. I think the people on ground zero are looking up to us, because we are speaking in the confines of air-conditioned room, and also making all this accusation that there are thieves here and there. All these leaders, they are fighting for one purpose: to liberate Ambazonia. I would challenge any Ambazonia who is out of the country, instead of trying to make non-Ambazonian be your friends and pull them in so that they can walk the street and carry our message to their leaders, so that they can lobby on our behalf. We are busy turning the guns. We are very good at talking to ourselves. If we Ambazonians, if just every Ambazonian, you can talk to your friend, your colleague, your church member, anyone that works with you about Ambazonia, and just imagine that if we are organizing a demonstration, we have the whole wide world, even just 100 stand in front of us. That is powerful. But you see the energy that we spend on actually insulting and calling other people thieves and all whatnot. I think we Ambazonians should really put the struggle ahead, not personality. What Chamfo had said, I really think that we should be united and support every leader, and not wash our dirty linen in public. If we have to prosecute them for wrongdoing, we do that, and not stand on top of the hill and point and accuse somebody and already pass judgment that this person is guilty. That is not the democratic way that we want for Ambazonia. So I think that this conversation has really enriched myself, and I hope that our viewer and our listeners out there can really ruminate over this and see how we can free Ambazonia. Over to you, Uncle.
Yes, thank you. I would simply like to first thank everyone for a wonderful conversation, which I certainly see, and I think people should see as further reasoning for the need of independence based on United Nations General Assembly 1514, that is further supported by United Nations General Resolution ARES 45/130, as well as A/49752. The government of Cameroon is not in compliance with the Charter of the United Nations. Further, the government of Cameroon's marginalization and genocide that we showed in today's meeting of people of Southern Cameroon is in violation of international law. So I certainly agree with Eric that it is the future where this needs to be. If there's nothing further, we are adjourned. We'll meet again in a couple of weeks, and thank you, everyone.
Ambazonia, special loyalty. Praise the soul of Savior who granted us the freedom. I live the soul the hero who brought along the gather.
Glory will rise and never to fall. Hearing a nation flowing with milk and honey. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of